I found out I'd been written out of my family's future on the same day I was asked to stand at my sister's wedding and smile. It wasn't dramatic at first. No shouting, no confrontation. Just a beige envelope sitting on my kitchen counter when I came home from work. My name typed neatly on the front, like it belonged there. Inside was a copy of a trust amendment, not the original will, an amendment. I read it once, without understanding. Then again, slower. Then a third time, standing perfectly still, my keys still in my hand. My name appeared exactly once. As previously listed beneficiary, now removed. No explanation, no signature from me, no warning. The trust belonged to my parents. The family trust that held the small manufacturing company my grandfather started 40 years ago. The company I'd worked for since I was 23. The company my parents always said would someday take care of all of us. All of us, apparently, had been redefined. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the paper until the words stopped moving. My name is Laura Whitman. I'm 32 years old. I live alone in a modest townhouse outside Columbus, Ohio. I have no children, no ex-husband, no dramatic past that would justify being quietly erased. I've always been the reliable one, the one who stayed close to home, the one who skipped opportunities in other cities because family comes first, the one who handled payroll when my mother forgot, the one who covered shifts when my father was tired, the one who trained my younger brother when he decided at 28 that he might like a job at the company after all. That brother is named Eric. And Eric, according to the amendment, was now the sole future beneficiary. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I folded the paper carefully and placed it back in the envelope, like it might explode if I handled it wrong. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Don't forget the wedding rehearsal tonight. Wear something neutral. This is Emily's moment. Emily is my sister, 2 years younger than me. Always celebrated, always protected, always described as sensitive. I typed, "I'll be there." I didn't mention the envelope. Not yet. At rehearsal, everyone acted normal. Too normal. My father laughed loudly with the groomsmen. My mother fussed over centerpieces. Emily floated from group to group in a cloud of excitement, her hand always gripping her fiancé's arm like a marker of ownership. When she hugged me, she whispered, "Thank you for being easy about everything." Easy about what, exactly? During dinner afterward, my father raised his glass. "To family," he said, "and to the future." Everyone clinked glasses. I didn't. Halfway through the meal, Eric leaned over to me. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, just long enough. No reason. That pause told me everything. He knew. After dinner, as people drifted out into the parking lot, my mother pulled me aside. "Laura," she said gently, the way she used to speak to me when she needed something from me. "We'll talk after the wedding. This isn't the time." I looked at her. "Talk about what?" Her smile tightened. "You don't need to make everything heavy," she said. "Sometimes being supportive means trusting us." "Trusting you to do what?" She touched my arm. "You're strong. You always have been." That sentence landed like a verdict. Strong meant manageable. Strong meant silent. Strong meant expendable. I drove home in the dark, with the envelope on the passenger seat, like a witness. I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the company records. The incorporation documents, the trust filings. Years of PDFs I'd helped prepare, but never really examined for myself. That's when I saw it. 6 months ago, my role at the company had quietly changed. Not in title, in authority. Certain approvals no longer required my sign-off. Certain decisions had been rerouted through Eric. I hadn't noticed because no one had told me. And because I'd been taught not to question things that were handled. This wasn't sudden. This was planned. By morning, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. This wasn't about the company. It wasn't about inheritance. It wasn't even about favoritism. It was about control. I was useful when I complied. Invisible when I didn't. The wedding was in 3 days. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't invited as family. I was invited as furniture. I showered, dressed for work, and picked up the envelope. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't demand answers. I didn't announce my pain. I did something else. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer, and as I clicked confirm, a strange calm settled over me. Because whatever they thought they'd finalized without me, they'd forgotten one thing. I knew where everything was buried. The lawyer's office was smaller than I expected. No marble floors, no dramatic views. Just a second-floor suite above a dental clinic, beige walls, and a woman in her mid-40s who read documents like she was listening for lies between the lines. Her name was Diane Kelly. She didn't interrupt while I talked. She didn't nod excessively or offer sympathy. She just listened, pen moving occasionally, eyes sharp. When I finished, she slid the trust amendment back across the desk toward me. "Did you sign this?" she asked. "No." "Did anyone notify you it existed before you found it?" "No." "Were you ever told you were being removed as a beneficiary?" "No." She leaned back slightly. "That's a problem," she said. "For them." I felt my shoulders drop a fraction. Not relief. Recognition. "Am I entitled to anything?" I asked. "That depends," she replied. "Not on what they say, on what the documents say, what your grandfather's will established, and whether the trust allows unilateral amendments without notice." "And does it?" Diane smiled faintly. "Rarely." She pulled a legal pad toward her. "Before we go further," she said, "I need to understand your role in the business." I told her everything. The unpaid overtime, the years of operational responsibility without formal authority, the way decisions had slowly moved away from me without explanation, the fact that I trained my brother into a role that quietly eclipsed my own. She wrote steadily. "When did Eric officially join the company?" she asked. 3 years ago. "And when did the amendment happen?" 6 months ago. "And the wedding?" she asked. "This weekend." She paused. "Timing matters," she said. When I left her office, I didn't feel angry. I felt alert. At work, nothing looked different. That was the unsettling part. My mother still brought pastries on Fridays. My father still held meetings that went nowhere. Eric still sat in the office across from mine, joking with employees like he belonged there. But now, I saw the structure beneath the surface. Who signed what? Who was copied on emails? Who wasn't? At lunch, Eric stopped by my desk. "You doing okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He lingered. "Wedding stuff can be stressful," he said. "Is that what this is?" I asked. He smiled tightly. "You know what I mean." "No," I replied calmly. "I don't." He shifted. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "Mom and Dad are just trying to simplify things." "For who?" I asked. "For the family," he said. I looked up at him. "I am the family," I said. He didn't answer. That afternoon, Diane emailed me. Subject line: foundational documents. She'd pulled the original trust, my grandfather's trust, the one created before his stroke, before my parents assumed temporary control. The language was clear. All children to benefit equally, unless removed for cause. Cause defined explicitly: fraud, abuse, criminal behavior, none of which applied to me. Even more interesting was a clause I'd never seen before. Any amendment removing a beneficiary required written notice and a 30-day response window. I stared at the screen. They hadn't just removed me. They'd bypassed procedure. That night, at the rehearsal dinner, I watched everything carefully. My mother's hand on Emily's back, guiding her where to stand. My father laughing a little too loudly. Eric holding court with relatives who suddenly treated him like the heir apparent. No one mentioned the trust. No one mentioned the business. It was like a play where everyone knew the script but me. Emily cornered me near the bar. "You're being quiet," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. She tilted her head. "You don't need to analyze everything." "I don't," I said. "I observe." She frowned. "You've always been dramatic," she said lightly, like it was a joke. I smiled. "Have I?" She looked away first. Later, my mother pulled me aside again. "You promise you won't do anything unexpected this weekend?" she asked. "Like what?" I asked. She hesitated. "You know, make things uncomfortable." "For whom?" I asked. "For everyone," she said. I nodded. I promised to behave, and I meant it. Because behaving didn't mean staying powerless. It meant waiting. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. White flowers, polished smiles, everything curated. I stood beside Emily at the altar, bouquet heavy in my hands, listening to vows about partnership and honesty. I wondered if she believed them. At the reception, my father gave a speech about legacy, about family businesses being passed down through generations, about trust. People clapped. I did too. Not because I agreed, because I understood something they didn't. The documents were already in motion. The process had begun. And while they were focused on appearances, I was preparing to reclaim something they'd decided I didn't deserve. Not their love, my autonomy. The next morning, I would send Diane the final authorization. And once I did, nothing would be handled quietly ever again. The morning after the wedding, the house was quiet, in the way only borrowed spaces ever are. I'd slept in my childhood bedroom, the one that still held trophies I didn't remember earning, and a desk I'd never been allowed to rearrange. Downstairs, I could hear my mother moving around the kitchen, the clink of coffee mugs, the soft efficiency she used when she wanted to pretend nothing had changed. I waited until I heard the garage door close. My father and Eric leaving together, most likely to check on something at the plant, as if married life hadn't altered priorities overnight. That was my window. I took the envelope from my bag and sat at the dining table. The same table where I'd once balanced spreadsheets while my parents discussed vacations they said we'd all take someday. I called Diane. "I'm ready," I said. She didn't ask what I meant. "Good. I'll file the notice today." "Will they know immediately?" I asked. "They'll receive formal notice within 48 hours, she replied. "But the effect begins the moment it's filed." I exhaled. "Then let's begin." After I hung up, I didn't rush. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, put it back in the cabinet exactly where my mother liked it. Then I went upstairs and packed my bag. When my mother returned, she looked surprised to see me by the door. "Already leaving?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She studied me, eyes narrowing slightly. "You seem distant." "I am," I replied. "It's intentional." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Well," she said after a moment, "we'll talk later." I nodded. "We will." At the plant, the change was subtle at first. My access badge still worked, but certain systems prompted additional verification. Emails that used to include me as default now required manual addition. It was as if the company itself was adjusting to a truth it had been avoiding. Eric stopped by my office mid-morning. "You hear anything from Mom?" he asked. "No," I said. He leaned against the doorframe. "She's worried." "About what?" I asked. He shrugged. "About you." I looked at him. "That's new." He didn't smile. "You know you could have just talked to us," he said, "instead of getting lawyers involved." "I tried," I replied. "For years. You just didn't listen." "That's not fair," he said quickly. "It's accurate," I replied. He stepped back. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be." "No," I said. "I'm finally seeing it clearly." He left without another word. By lunchtime, Diane forwarded confirmation. Notice filed. Temporary injunction requested. Trust amendment challenged. I closed my laptop and went for a walk. Outside, the air was crisp, early autumn biting at the edges. I walked past the employee lot, the loading docks, the building I'd helped keep afloat during downturns no one remembered anymore. I wasn't angry. I was awake. That afternoon, my mother called. Her tone was controlled, but the softness was gone. "What did you do?" she asked. "I followed the law," I replied. "You blindsided us," she said. "No," I said. "I responded to what you did, quietly." She inhaled sharply. "This will hurt the company. It will expose how it's been run," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." She lowered her voice. "You're forcing our hand." I thought of all the times mine had been forced. "Good," I said. She hung up. An hour later, my father appeared at my office door. He didn't knock. "What's going on?" he demanded. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down." He didn't. "You're jeopardizing everything," he said. "Your sister just got married. The timing was chosen by you," I said calmly. His jaw tightened. "We did what we thought was best." "For who?" I asked. "For stability," he said. "For control," I corrected. He slammed his hand on my desk. "You owe this family." I met his eyes. "I paid my debt in labor, loyalty, and silence. You don't get more." For a moment, he looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he turned and walked out. By the end of the day, the rumor mill was alive. People whispered, looked at me differently. Not with pity, with curiosity. That evening, Diane called. "They're scrambling," she said. "Your parents' attorney reached out. They want to talk." "About what?" I asked. "About reversing the amendment," she said. Conditionally. Conditionally, I repeated. Yes, she said. They want you to withdraw the injunction in exchange. I smiled faintly. No, that's what I told them, Diane replied. Next step is discovery. What will that uncover? I asked. Financial decisions, internal communications. Who knew what and when, she said. It won't be comfortable. It doesn't need to be, I said. That night, I packed my office. Not dramatically, just my personal things. Photos, books, the mug someone gave me when I'd hit 10 years. I left my keys on the desk. The next morning, I didn't go in. I emailed HR instead. Effective immediately, I resigned my position. Please coordinate with my attorney for any further communication. My phone rang within minutes. Eric, my mother, my father. I didn't answer. I wasn't running. I was stepping out of a system that only worked when I stayed inside it. Later that day, Diane forwarded another update. The court had granted a temporary freeze on trust changes. No assets could move. No roles could be reassigned. The company, for the first time in decades, was forced to operate transparently. I sat in my living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd finally stopped negotiating my place. Whatever came next, it would be on record. And that was the one thing my family had never prepared for. Resigning felt different than I expected. I didn't feel reckless. I didn't feel brave. I felt precise. For years, my value inside the company had been tied to my availability, my willingness to absorb pressure quietly, to fix things without credit, and accept decisions without context. Walking away wasn't an emotional gesture. It was a structural one. I removed leverage. The first real consequence came 2 days later. Diane called early, her voice focused. They've retained outside counsel, she said. Not the firm they usually use. That sounds expensive, I said. It is, she replied. Which tells me they're nervous. She explained what discovery would look like. Internal emails, financial transfers, meeting notes, draft documents. Everything they'd assumed would never be read by anyone outside the family. You should be prepared, she said, for things you didn't know. I already am, I replied. At home, my phone stayed quiet longer than I expected. No messages, no apologies, no threats. Silence, I'd learned, was their preferred tactic when control slipped. I used the time to go through my own records, old emails, archived files, notes I'd taken during meetings years ago, and never thought to keep for any reason other than organization. Patterns emerged once I stopped looking at them as isolated moments. Decisions rerouted. Authority blurred. Promises made verbally, but never documented. They hadn't just sidelined me, they'd practiced. On the third day, Emily called. Her voice sounded tight, exhausted. Why didn't tell you what? I replied. That this was happening, she said. That you were being pushed out. I paused. That's not fair, she said quickly. I didn't ask for this. You didn't refuse it either, I replied. She inhaled sharply. You're ruining everything. No, I said. I'm refusing to be erased quietly. You always do this, she said. You make it about principles instead of people. I thought people who require my silence aren't protecting relationships, I said. They're protecting comfort. She hung up. That afternoon, Diane sent over the first batch of discovery. Emails between my parents and Eric. Strategy discussions disguised as concern. Conversations about optics, about timing, about how I would eventually understand. One email, sent by my mother to Eric, made my chest tighten. Laura is strong. She'll land on her feet. This is just easier. I closed the file and stared at the wall. That sentence explained more than any legal document ever could. Later that evening, my father showed up at my door. No warning, no call. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking smaller without the authority of his office behind him. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit. This has gone far enough, he said. We're willing to put things back the way they were. The way they were wasn't fair, I replied. It was functional, he said. For you, I replied. He sighed. You've always had a tendency to complicate things. I met his eyes. You've always had a tendency to simplify them at my expense. He didn't deny it. We built this company, he said. You don't get to dismantle it out of spite. I'm not dismantling it, I said. I'm exposing how it's been run. He stepped closer. If this continues, people will get hurt. They already have, I said. You just didn't count me. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he said something else. If you withdraw the injunction, he said carefully, we can revisit your role. A different position, something less central. There it was. Not restoration. Reassignment. You want me contained, I said. He looked away. I want peace, he said. Peace that requires my compliance isn't peace, I replied. He nodded once, jaw tight, and walked out. That night, I dreamed I was back in the office, watching everyone work around me like I was invisible. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. I woke before the panic set in. The next morning, Diane called again. Your brother's lawyer filed a motion, she said. For what? I asked. To compel mediation, she replied. They're pushing for a private resolution. I laughed quietly. Of course they are. They don't want discovery completed, she said. Too much risk. Then we're on the right track, I replied. By the end of the week, rumors had reached former clients. I received a call from a vendor I'd worked with for years. Just checking in, he said carefully. Heard there's some restructuring. There is, I said. And you're not there anymore? No, I replied. A pause. That's interesting, he said. You were always the one who kept things steady. After the call, I realized something important. My value had never been invisible. It had been inconvenient. That weekend, I attended a small dinner with friends, people who knew nothing about the business or the trust. They talked about movies, travel, work frustrations that ended when the office lights went off. At one point, someone asked how my family was doing. I answered honestly, we're redefining things. That night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Diane. More emails uncovered, including drafts of the trust amendment with different dates. Different versions. They backdated it, she wrote. We can prove it. I stared at the screen, heart steady. This wasn't just about exclusion anymore. This was about fraud. And once that door opened, there was no closing it quietly. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling. The wedding was over. The silence was broken. And the story they'd written without me was finally being read out loud. Fraud changes the temperature of a room, even when the room is imaginary. Once Diane used the word, everything sharpened. The past wasn't just unfair anymore. It was actionable. I didn't celebrate. I didn't panic. I opened a notebook and started writing dates. Backdating documents isn't a mistake. It's a decision, one that requires coordination, intent, and confidence that no one will look too closely. The confidence usually comes from familiarity, from having done it before, from knowing who stays quiet. I called Diane the next morning. What happens next? I asked. We expand discovery, she said, and we notify the court. Will there be consequences? I asked. There could be, she replied carefully, especially if we can establish pattern. Pattern. Another word that changes everything. I spent the day reconstructing timelines. Not emotionally, mechanically. When meetings happened, when emails stopped copying me, when Eric's title quietly changed on internal org charts without announcement, when my mother began insisting decisions be discussed verbally instead of over email. Control leaves fingerprints. They just assumed I wouldn't bother dusting. That afternoon, a message came through LinkedIn. It was from Martin Hale. Martin had been my grandfather's accountant for nearly 20 years before retiring. He'd attended family holidays, birthdays, even the occasional barbecue. He'd always been polite, reserved, observant. His message was brief. Saw your name mentioned in a filing. If you're open to talking, I may have context. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I replied, yes. We met the next day at a quiet cafe near his home. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were sharp. I won't stay long, he said after we ordered. And I'm not taking sides. I'm just correcting a record. Go on, I said. He folded his hands. Your grandfather was very specific, he said, about equal treatment. I know, I replied. He was also very specific about your mother's role, Martin continued. He didn't trust her with unilateral authority. I felt my chest tighten slightly. Why? Martin hesitated. Because she believed fairness was negotiable. He reached into his bag and slid a thin folder across the table. Copies, he said, of correspondence your parents didn't realize I retained. Inside were letters, old ones, handwritten, From my grandfather to Martin, expressing concern, asking for oversight, asking that certain changes never be made without full disclosure to all beneficiaries. He was worried, Martin said quietly. About you. About me? I asked. He thought you'd be leaned on, he said, because you were capable, because you wouldn't make noise. I closed the folder carefully. Thank you, I said. He nodded. Whatever happens next, remember this. He saw you. That mattered more than I expected. When I got home, Diane had left a voicemail. They're denying intent, she said, claiming administrative error. Backdating isn't administrative, I said into the empty room. She called back an hour later. They've requested a private settlement conference, she said. Again. And? I asked. And I told them we're past that, she replied. Especially now. That evening, my father emailed me directly for the first time since everything began. Subject: we need to resolve this. The body was short. This has gone too far. We're willing to make things right if you stop pursuing this line of attack. Think about what you're risking. I didn't respond. Risk was the language they used when consequences approached them instead of me. The next morning, my mother left a voicemail. Her voice was calmer than I expected. I don't know what you think you're proving, she said, but this path will leave you very alone. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. At noon, Diane forwarded a new filing from Eric's attorney. Motion to dismiss on grounds of familial dispute resolution. They were trying to reframe fraud as family drama. It was almost insulting. Can they do that? I asked. They can try, Diane replied. But judges don't like when legal obligations are disguised as personal disagreements. I thought of all the times my concerns had been dismissed as emotional, as overthinking, as unnecessary tension. This was the grown-up version of that tactic. That afternoon, a reporter called. I didn't answer. Diane advised against it. Not yet, she said. Let the documents speak first. I agreed. Silence, used correctly, is a strategy. By the end of the week, the court ordered full forensic accounting of the trust and company finances over the past 5 years. That order did something no argument ever could. It removed my family's ability to manage perception. Now there would be numbers, trails, names attached to decisions. Eric called that night. Why are you doing this? He asked. I'm correcting something, I replied. You're blowing up our parents' lives, he said. No, I said. They built something fragile. I'm just touching it. He went quiet. You don't understand what this will cost, he said finally. I do, I replied. I've been paying it for years. He hung up. I sat on the couch and let the silence settle. I wasn't enjoying this. That surprised me. There was no thrill, no satisfaction, just a steady sense of inevitability. When systems rely on silence, the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote one line. I am not taking revenge. I am taking my name back. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. A message from Diane. They just found something, she wrote. We need to talk in the morning. I stared at the ceiling, heart steady, because whatever they'd found, it meant the story was no longer about exclusion. It was about exposure, and that changes everything. Diane's voice sounded different when she called the next morning. Not alarmed. Focused. We need to meet, she said. In person. I was already dressed, already awake longer than the clock suggested. I'll be there, I replied. Her office felt smaller than it had before, like the walls had shifted inward now that the stakes were higher. She closed the door behind me and placed a thick binder on the table. They found a second set of books, she said. I didn't speak. Not sloppy, she continued. Not hidden in a drawer. Structured, maintained, updated. I felt something tighten in my chest. At the company? At the trust level, she said, and mirrored in the company accounts. She flipped the binder open. Transfers labeled as consulting fees. Loans reclassified as reimbursements. Expenses that flowed through shell entities before landing exactly where they were intended. Your parents? I asked. Diane nodded. And your brother. Different degrees, different timing. I leaned back slowly. How long? I asked. At least 4 years, she said. Possibly longer. 4 years. That meant it had started while I was still handling payroll. While I was approving expense reports that never showed the full picture. While I was being praised for keeping things running smoothly. They used your structure, Diane said. Your systems. They just fed them incomplete information. I closed my eyes briefly. They didn't cut me out because I was weak, I said. No, Diane replied. They cut you out because you were too competent. The forensic accountant joined us an hour later. A quiet man named Stephen, who spoke in precise sentences and never raised his voice. Once the trust amendment was challenged, he explained, we expanded scope. That's when the discrepancies surfaced. He slid a chart across the table. Money moved like a pattern, not a mistake. All was away from shared accounts. All was justified by urgency. Always signed off by at least 2 people. Never me. They insulated you, Stephen said, which also insulated them. You with a clean line. The phrase landed hard. I'd been kept pure, so they could stay dirty. Can this be proven? I asked. Stephen nodded. Yes. Will it be? I asked. That depends, Diane said, on how far you want to go. I didn't answer right away because that was the question they'd never expected me to ask myself. How far? Not out of fear, out of clarity. If I pushed forward, there would be consequences beyond restoring my place. There would be investigations, reputations damaged, possibly charges. If I stopped now, I could negotiate quietly. Reinstatement, compensation, an apology dressed as resolution. This was the fork. What happens if we proceed? I asked. Diane didn't soften it. The court will likely refer findings to regulatory authorities. The company could face penalties. Your parents could face personal liability. And Eric? I asked. She paused. He signed off on transactions. Yes. I thought of the wedding, his awkward questions, the way he'd avoided my eyes. He'd known enough to benefit, not enough to lead. I need time, I said. Diane nodded. Take it, but understand this. If we pause, they'll reposition. They already are. On my way out, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls. My mother, my father, Eric. 1 voicemail from Eric. Laura, please. We need to talk before this gets worse. Worse for who? I didn't call back. Instead, I drove. No destination, just movement. The kind that lets your thoughts settle into order. I remembered the first time I'd balanced the books on my own. 24 years old. Nervous. Proud. Trusted. I remembered my mother telling me how lucky she was to have a daughter like me. I remembered believing her. By the time I got home, the answer was clear. I called Diane. Proceed, I said. She didn't hesitate. Okay. That afternoon, the formal notice went out. Expanded discovery. Regulatory referral. Court oversight requested. The response was immediate. My father showed up again. This time, he didn't pretend calm. You're destroying us, he said, the moment I opened the door. No, I replied. I'm stopping you. My mother stood behind him, face pale. This was never meant to hurt you, she said. And yet, I replied, it did. Eric stepped forward. We can fix this, he said. Privately. Privately is how it got broken, I replied. My father's voice dropped. Do you know what happens if this goes public? Yes, I said. People learn the truth. That's not justice, he snapped. That's vengeance. I looked at him. Justice, I said, isn't concerned with your comfort. They left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from awareness. I'd crossed the point of no return. The next morning, Diane forwarded a new development. An emergency board meeting had been called at the company. Without me, for the first time, I smiled, because that meant they were reacting. And reaction is what happens when control is already gone. But the real shock came an hour later. A text from an unknown number. You should look at what your sister signed. Attached was a scanned document. My sister's name at the bottom. A power of attorney, dated 2 years ago. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Emily, not just aware. Involved. The betrayal I thought I understood had just taken on a new shape. And suddenly, the wedding felt like something else entirely. Not a celebration. A cover. Emily's signature sat at the bottom of the page like it belonged there. Neat. Confident. Dated 2 years earlier. Power of attorney. Limited, but specific. Authority to sign on behalf of the trust for temporary administrative continuity. The language was polished. The kind that sounds harmless until you understand what it allows. I read it 3 times. Then, a 4th. This wasn't something slipped under pressure. It wasn't a panicked decision made during a crisis. It was planned, reviewed, executed quietly, while I was still showing up every day, believing I was part of the future. I forwarded the document to Diane without commentary. She called within minutes. "That changes the structure," she said. "How?" I asked. "Your parents didn't act alone," she replied. "They distributed liability." "And Emily?" I asked. "She wasn't just protected," Diane said. "She was positioned." The word settled heavily. Position. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place where the envelope had first landed weeks ago. Nothing in the room had changed, but the story had. I thought about every moment Emily had looked at me with that familiar mix of affection and irritation. Every time she'd said, "You're overthinking," or "You always take things so seriously." She hadn't been dismissing me. She'd been managing me. I called her. She didn't answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I waited. An hour later, she texted, "Can't talk right now. Too much going on." I typed back. I saw the power of attorney. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, my phone rang. Her voice was sharp, defensive. "Where did you get that?" she demanded. "That's not the question," I said. "Of course it is," she snapped. "Someone's manipulating you." "No," I replied. "Someone trusted me with the truth." She laughed, short and brittle. "You always think you're the only one who sees things clearly." "Then explain it," I said. "Explain why you needed authority over assets that weren't yours." Silence stretched. "It was temporary," she said finally. "Mom and Dad needed help. You were too busy with work." "With work at the same company?" I asked. She sighed. "You're twisting this." "I'm reading it," I said. "That's all." Her tone shifted, softer now, familiar. "You don't understand how fragile things were," she said. "Dad was under so much pressure. The business, the loans, everything. Someone had to step up." "And you volunteered," I said. "I was asked," she replied. There it was. Asked. "Did you ever think to tell me?" I asked. She hesitated. "It wasn't your responsibility. It was my future," I said. She snapped back. "You already had everything. The job, the respect. You don't know what it's like to be underestimated." I closed my eyes. "You think I wasn't?" I asked quietly. "You were trusted," she said. "Trusted to carry weight," I replied. "Not trusted to decide." She didn't respond. "Emily," I said, "did you know they plan to remove me from the trust?" Another pause. Longer this time. "They said it was temporary," she said. "Just until things stabilize." "Did you believe that?" I asked. She exhaled. "I wanted to." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "That's the difference between us," I said. I needed proof. She grew angry again. "So what now? You're going to drag me into court too?" "I'm not dragging anyone," I replied. "I'm not hiding anyone either." "You'd really do this?" she asked. "To your own sister?" I answered honestly. "I'm doing this for myself." She hung up. That night, Diane sent an updated assessment. "With Emily involved," she wrote, "this shifts the narrative from parental overreach to coordinated governance manipulation. In plain terms, conspiracy. Not dramatic, just factual." I lay awake thinking about the wedding, the speech my father gave about legacy, the way Emily had squeezed my hand and said, "Thank you for being easy." Easy meant uninformed. Easy meant useful. Easy meant silent. The next morning, Diane called again. "They've requested an emergency mediation," she said. "All parties." "All parties," I repeated. "Yes," she said, "including your sister." I agreed. Not because I wanted closure, because I wanted the truth stated out loud. The mediation room was windowless and cold. Everyone arrived separately. My parents sat together, rigid. Eric sat slightly apart, eyes fixed on the table. Emily arrived last, face composed, jaw tight. No one smiled. The mediator began with procedural language, then opened the floor. Diane spoke first, calm, precise. She laid out the findings, the backdating, the parallel books, the unauthorized amendment, the power of attorney. Emily stiffened visibly when her name was mentioned. When it was her turn to speak, she lifted her chin. "I never intended to harm my sister," she said. "I was trying to protect my family." "By excluding me?" I asked. She looked at me. Really looked. "You were always going to be fine," she said. "You don't need this." The words hit harder than any accusation. "You don't get to decide what I need," I said, "or what I deserve." My mother reached for Emily's hand. The mediator cleared his throat. "We need to discuss resolution," he said. Diane shook her head. "At this point, resolution is a matter for the court." Emily's composure cracked. "You're choosing this," she said to me. "You're choosing to burn everything." I met her eyes. "No," I said. "I'm choosing not to be burned quietly." The mediation ended without agreement. Outside, Eric caught up to me. "She didn't mean it," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it worse." When I got home, I sat in silence for a long time. The betrayal had layers. Not just greed, not just fear, entitlement. They'd all believed, in different ways, that my strength made me optional. That belief had shaped years of decisions. Tomorrow, the court filings would include Emily's name, not as punishment, as fact. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. And clarity, I was learning, is the most destabilizing thing you can bring into a system built on assumptions. Once Emily's name entered the filings, the tone changed everywhere. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a building after a load-bearing wall is compromised. Things began to shift in small, unmistakable ways. The first sign came from the company's bank. A compliance officer called Diane to verify authorization structures. Apparently, someone had tried to move funds between accounts flagged by the forensic review. The transfer was stopped automatically. Panic leaves fingerprints too. Diane forwarded the email with a single line. "They're trying to clean up." It was too late for that. The second sign came from my sister-in-law, Hannah, Eric's wife. She texted me late one night. I didn't know who else to ask. "Is it true they might lose the company?" I stared at the message longer than necessary. Then I replied, "The company is under review. What happens depends on what the records show." A minute passed. Then another message. "Eric says you're doing this to punish everyone." I exhaled slowly before responding. "I'm doing this because the truth exists whether we look at it or not." No reply after that. At work, former colleagues began reaching out quietly. Not gossiping, asking questions they'd never asked before. Why did approvals change last year? Why were certain vendors always fast-tracked? Why did some expenses never show up in reports? I answered what I could. Carefully. Factually. I didn't speculate. I didn't accuse. I let the silence between answers do the work. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. Just procedural. Just timelines. But everyone treated it like something else. My parents hired a crisis consultant. Someone to manage messaging. That alone told me how seriously they were taking exposure. Emily went silent. No calls, no texts, no indirect messages through our mother. I wondered if she was angry or afraid. Probably both. The night before the hearing, Diane called me at home. "There's been a development," she said. I braced. "Your parents are offering a full reinstatement," she said. "Beneficiary status restored, financial compensation, a formal apology." "And Emily?" I asked. "They want her excluded from liability," Diane replied. "They're framing her as misled." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. "What do you want to do?" Diane asked. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. "I want the record to be accurate," I said. "That's all." "That means saying no," she said. "I know." The hearing room was larger than the mediation space. Less personal. More formal. The judge listened without expression as Diane summarized the case. When my parents' attorney spoke, the language softened. Family. Miscommunication. Stress. Unintended consequences. Emily sat behind them, hands folded, eyes fixed straight ahead. When the judge asked if any party wished to speak directly, Emily surprised everyone. She stood. "I do," she said. Her voice was steady. "I signed the power of attorney," she said. "I understood what it meant. I believed I was helping. I didn't think it would go this far." She paused, glanced at me. "I didn't think Laura would challenge it." The judge looked at her. "Did anyone tell you your sister would be excluded from the trust?" he asked. Emily hesitated. "Yes," she said. The room went still. "And you proceeded anyway?" he asked. "Yes," she said again, quieter. The judge nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "You may sit." That was it. No drama. No commentary, just a statement entered into record. After the hearing, my mother tried to approach me. I didn't stop. Not because I was angry, because this wasn't a personal conversation anymore. This was history. 2 days later, the court issued a ruling. The trust amendment was voided permanently. Oversight appointed. Independent trustee assigned. All major financial decisions subject to review. Additionally, the judge ordered a full audit of the company, with findings to be shared with regulators if warranted. Emily was named explicitly, not as a villain. As a participant, that distinction mattered. The fallout was swift. The crisis consultant resigned. Eric stepped down from his role temporarily. Vendors froze contracts. Employees started asking questions out loud. The structure my family had relied on began to wobble under the weight of transparency. That evening, Emily finally called. Her voice was raw. "I didn't think you'd go this far," she said. "I didn't think you'd sign that document," I replied. She swallowed. "I thought I was protecting everyone." "You were protecting access," I said, "not people." She cried then, not loudly, just quietly. "I don't know who I am without them," she said. "That's something you'll have to find out," I replied, like I did. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. We ended the call without resolution. That night, I sat alone and let the weight of everything settle. The company might survive. It might not. My parents might recover financially. Or they might not. Emily might rebuild her sense of self. Or she might cling to the old narrative. None of that was in my control anymore. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like alignment. The next phase wouldn't be about uncovering the truth. It would be about what everyone did once the truth could no longer be denied. And that was where real consequences lived. Once the court appointed an independent trustee, the phone calls changed. They didn't stop. They shifted. Instead of pressure, there was curiosity. Instead of demands, there were questions that sounded almost respectful. People who had never needed my opinion before suddenly wanted context. Not because I was powerful, because I was no longer controllable. The trustee's name was Harold Linton, early 60s, former federal auditor. No family ties, no interest in feelings. He requested a meeting within 48 hours of his appointment. We met in a plain conference room downtown. No branding, no warmth. He reviewed documents silently, then looked up at me. "You worked inside this structure," he said. "But you weren't part of the decisions that created these risks." "That's correct," I replied. He nodded. "You were intentionally excluded." "Yes." "Why do you think that was?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. Because I would have asked questions. He made a note. "That's usually the reason," he said. Over the next 2 weeks, the audit deepened. Payroll discrepancies, vendor favoritism, personal expenses buried under operational codes. The kind of thing that doesn't look criminal until you stack it side by side. Eric's resignation became permanent. My father took a medical leave that no one questioned, but everyone understood. My mother stopped answering emails altogether. And Emily disappeared. Not dramatically. No announcement. Just silence. I heard from Hannah that she'd moved out of the house and into a short-term rental. That she was taking space. Space from whom? I wasn't sure. At work, or what used to be work, the consequences finally reached the floor. Production slowed. Orders were delayed. Employees worried aloud about layoffs. I felt the weight of that. Not guilt, but responsibility. I met with Harold again. "The company doesn't deserve to fail," I said. "It employs people who had nothing to do with this." He studied me. "Are you asking to intervene?" "I'm asking to advise," I said, "if you'll allow it." He considered. "You no longer have a formal role," he said. "I know," I replied, "but I know the systems, and I'm not conflicted." That earned me a long look. "Fine," he said. "As a consultant. Paid. Transparent." I agreed. Walking back into the plant felt surreal. Same smells, same sounds, different posture. People watched me carefully. Not with resentment, with relief. I didn't give speeches. I didn't promise stability. I reviewed processes, identified bottlenecks, made recommendations. Quietly. When someone asked why I was helping after everything, I answered honestly, because fairness doesn't require destruction. The audit report was released a month later. It was dense, technical, unforgiving, but it didn't sensationalize. It didn't accuse emotionally. It documented. That alone was devastating. Regulators requested follow-up. No charges yet, but oversight would remain. The trust was restructured, equal beneficiaries restored, independent administration locked in. My parents' authority was gone, not publicly revoked, administratively replaced. That distinction mattered. Emily emailed me 2 days after the report. Subject: I don't know where to stand. The body was short. I didn't see it clearly until it was too late. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know that. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, knowing late doesn't erase impact, but it does change what comes next. Take care of yourself. She didn't respond. That was fine. At a Sunday dinner with friends, someone asked if I felt vindicated. I thought about it. Vindication implies someone lost, I said. This isn't about winning. What is it about then? She asked. Ending something that shouldn't have existed, I replied. That night, I walked through my house and noticed how still it felt. Not tense, not hollow, resolved. I realized something important. The most dangerous part of what my family had done wasn't the money. It was the assumption that I would absorb the cost of keeping things smooth. That assumption had shaped every choice they made. And once it was gone, everything else followed. The trustee called a final meeting. We'll be stabilizing operations over the next quarter, Harold said. After that, long-term leadership decisions will be made. Am I considered? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. You could be, he said finally, if you want to be. I thought about my life before all of this, the quiet exhaustion, the constant vigilance. I don't know yet, I said. He nodded. That's a fair answer. Driving home, I understood something clearly. For the first time, my future wasn't being decided in rooms I wasn't invited into. It was open. And the choice of what came next was finally mine. But before I could move forward, there was one more conversation that hadn't happened yet. And I knew exactly who it would be with. I didn't have to guess who the final conversation would be with. My mother called the next morning. Not a voicemail, not a text, a direct call. The kind she used only when she intended to be heard. I let it ring once longer than necessary before answering. Laura, she said. No preamble, no softness. Yes, I replied. Can we meet? She asked. Just the two of us. I considered it. Not emotionally, logistically. Where? I asked. Our house, she said automatically. No, I replied. Public. A pause. There's a cafe on Elm, she said. That works, I replied. She arrived early. I could tell because when I walked in, she was already seated, hands wrapped tightly around a cup she wasn't drinking from. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not older, smaller, like someone whose authority had been removed from the room. I sat across from her. She didn't smile. You humiliated us, she said quietly. I met her eyes. You excluded me. She flinched, just slightly. We didn't think you'd take it this far, she said. That's the problem, I replied. You never thought I'd act. She shook her head. You've always been so steady. We assumed you'd understand. Understand what? I asked. That my role was to carry weight without agency? She looked away. We needed someone reliable, she said. You needed someone compliant, I replied. Her jaw tightened. You always reduce things to absolutes. No, I said. I reduce them to truth. She inhaled slowly. Emily is struggling. I know, I said. She feels betrayed, my mother continued. By you. I let the words sit. She signed legal authority over my future, I said, without telling me. If she feels betrayed, it's because she's confronting her own choices. My mother's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. We thought we were protecting the family, she said. You were protecting control, I replied. There's a difference. She leaned forward. You could stop this, even now. Stop what? I asked. The scrutiny, the consequences, she said. We could still settle. Quietly. I shook my head. This isn't something I started, I said. It's something I stopped participating in. She studied me, like she was searching for the version of me she remembered. You're different, she said. No, I replied. I'm uncontained. That landed. She sat back, defeated in a way I hadn't expected. I don't know how to be your mother without managing you, she admitted. The honesty surprised me. Then this is your chance to learn, I said. We sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke again. Do you hate us? She asked. I considered the question carefully. No, I said. But I don't trust you. She nodded slowly, as if that answer made sense. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "Will you come to family holidays?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I replied. "That depends on whether I'm expected to shrink." She didn't argue. That afternoon, Harold called. "We're finalizing leadership recommendations," he said. "Your name is on the list." "For what?" I asked. "Interim operations lead," he said, "with a clear mandate and external oversight." I leaned back in my chair. "And if I say no?" I asked. "Then we respect that," he replied. "This isn't a family decision. It's a professional one." I thanked him and asked for time. That evening, I walked through my neighborhood, letting the air cool my thoughts. Taking the role would mean stepping back into a space that had cost me years of quiet exhaustion. But it would also mean something else. Rewriting the system from the inside. Not for them. For myself. For the people who worked there. For the version of me who had believed fairness would eventually arrive without being demanded. When I got home, I opened my laptop and drafted an email. I outlined my conditions clearly. Defined authority. Independent reporting. No family interference. Exit clauses written in plain language. I sent it. The response came the next morning. Approved, just like that. Emily texted me later that day. "I heard you might be taking over." "I don't know how to feel about that," I replied. "You don't have to feel anything. This isn't about you." She didn't respond. That was fine. As I prepared for the transition, I realized something important. This wasn't revenge. Revenge requires obsession with the people who hurt you. This was something else. This was choosing not to abandon a space just because others tried to own it. The power shift hadn't happened in court. It had happened the moment I stopped asking permission to exist fully. And now, the final stage wasn't confrontation. It was authorship. One decision left, whether I wanted to carry this story forward or close it on my own terms. The first day back at the plant felt nothing like coming home. It felt like crossing a border. No familiar assumptions followed me through the door. No unspoken expectations. No inherited authority. I was there by contract, not blood. By mandate, not obligation. That distinction changed everything. People stood straighter when I entered a room. Not out of fear, out of clarity. They knew why I was there. They knew what I could and couldn't do. And for the first time, so did I. I didn't take my old office. I chose a smaller one, near operations. Glass walls, no door theatrics, nothing hidden. My first meeting was with department heads, people I'd worked alongside for years but had never truly led. "I'm not here to undo the past," I said. "I'm here to stabilize the present." No speeches, no promises of loyalty, just parameters. Within a week, the effects were visible. Approval chains shortened. Vendor contracts were rebid. Expense reporting tightened. Conversations that used to happen behind closed doors moved into documented channels. Some people resisted quietly. Others welcomed it openly. The ones who struggled most were the ones who had benefited from ambiguity. My father didn't come in. He sent an email instead. Formal, polite, carefully worded. "I wish you well in your new role. I hope the company survives all this." I read it once, then archived it. My mother didn't reach out at all. Emily sent one message. I didn't realize how much of myself I gave up trying to belong. I stared at it longer than necessary, then replied, "Belonging that costs your agency isn't belonging." She reacted with a single word. "I know." That was enough. Midweek, Harold stopped by my office. "You're moving fast," he observed. "I'm moving clearly," I replied. He nodded. "The board agrees. Morale is stabilizing." "What about the regulators?" I asked. "Still reviewing," he said. "But transparency is working in your favor." That night, I sat alone in my living room and let the quiet settle. Not the tense quiet of waiting, the earned quiet of alignment. I realized something then. The anger I'd expected never came. I wasn't driven by payback or justice as punishment. I was driven by coherence, making sure the story made sense. On Friday, Hannah called. Eric had moved out. They were separating. "I don't know who he is without all this," she said. "Neither does he," I replied. She sighed. "I don't blame you." "I'm not asking for blame," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's the hardest part." Over the weekend, I cleaned out my house. Not because I was moving, Because I wanted to choose what stayed. Old paperwork went into the shredder, childhood memorabilia into a single box. Not discarded, just contained. I kept one thing on my desk, the original trust language. The part my grandfather had written himself, all children, to benefit equally. Simple, direct, undeniable. On Sunday evening, I received an email from Harold. The board will confirm your role permanently at the end of the quarter if performance continues at this level. I closed my laptop. That confirmation didn't throw me. It grounded me, because the decision I'd been avoiding wasn't about staying or leaving. It was about identity, who I was when no one was deciding for me. I went to bed early. For the first time in months, I slept without dreams of confrontation or defense. In the morning, I woke with a single thought, clear and unburdened. The story no longer needed escalation. It needed closure. And I knew exactly how I would write it. The ending didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way things do when they're finally in the right place. 3 months after I stepped into the role, the board met for its final review. No tension, no dramatic pauses, just data, outcomes, and a vote that passed without discussion. Permanent appointment confirmed. I thanked them. Not emotionally, professionally. And then, in the same meeting, I did something no one expected. I won't be staying, I said. The room went still. Harold looked at me carefully. This wasn't discussed. I know, I replied. That's intentional. I explained my decision calmly. The company was stable now. Systems were in place. Oversight was functioning. The culture had shifted enough to sustain itself without me acting as a counterweight to family dynamics that no longer officially existed. Staying would have meant inheriting something I didn't want to own. Control. I'm stepping down effective in 60 days, I said. I'll help transition leadership. Then I'm done. No one argued. They didn't need to. That afternoon, I walked through the plant one last time. Not with nostalgia, with appreciation. People stopped me to say thank you. Some hugged me. Others just nodded, eyes steady. It mattered. I didn't tell my parents. There was nothing to tell. Emily found out through someone else and called me that night. You're leaving, she said. Yes, I replied. Why? She asked. You finally got everything back. I paused. I didn't get it back, I said. I proved I never needed it. She was quiet. I don't know how to start over, she said. You already are, I replied. You just haven't named it yet. She exhaled. Do you think we'll ever be okay? I answered honestly. I think we'll be separate. And that might be the healthiest version of okay. She didn't disagree. The final paperwork was clean, boring, exactly how endings should be. I used part of my settlement and severance to fund a small consulting practice. Nothing flashy. Operational audits, governance transitions, helping organizations untangle control from competence. Clients came quickly. Apparently, I had a reputation. On my last day at the plant, I packed nothing. There was nothing left that belonged to a version of me I needed to carry forward. That night, I went home and opened the window. The air moved freely through the room. I thought about revenge, how it's usually imagined as spectacle, as humiliation, as someone else's collapse. But the most effective revenge is invisible. It's refusing to remain in a system that depends on your silence. It's making yourself unmanageable to people who only valued you when you were easy. It's choosing clarity over proximity. I didn't destroy my family. I withdrew my participation. Everything that fell apart after that was already broken. If you're listening to this and recognizing pieces of your own life in it, hear this. You don't need permission to stop carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. You don't owe loyalty to structures that require you to disappear. And you don't need to explain your boundaries to people who benefit from you not having them. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step out of the frame. Let the picture reveal what was really there. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment. I read them. And if you want more stories about family drama, betrayal, inheritance, and the kind of revenge that looks like freedom instead of fire, like and subscribe. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the first chapter I wrote myself.